Almighty God, you have so linked our lives one with another that all we do affects, for good or ill, all other lives. So guide us in the work we do, that we may do it not for self alone, but for the common good. Amen. We've got a lot of bits and pieces to tie together today. It's Labor Day weekend, hence the collect for Labor Day. It is the opening Sunday in the season of creation. So we are meant to be thinking about our stewardship of the earth. It is also the 13th anniversary of our feeding program, Pep's Pantry. And we've got this pretty key passage from Matthew about who Jesus is and what that really means. Oh, and there's that little passage that you might have heard of about Moses and a burning bush. So that's why I wanted to start with the opening sentences from our collect for Labor Day. Because, you know what, I cannot possibly cover all of those pieces in just one sermon. I'd say each of them kind of deserves its own sermon, right? But I kind of think that the opening from the collect for Labor Day gives us a key into some of these different pieces and how they might fit together. Because that two sentences reminds us of two important things. First, it reminds us that God knits our human lives together with each other and with all life. In other words, we are in this together. And then it also asserts that there means there's implications. Implications for how we live that go beyond our own needs, our own wants, and our own desires. In other words, we should act like we are in this together. But that's still a lot. Doesn't really sound easy on face value, does it? I mean, if it was easy, we'd all be doing it, wouldn't we? And you know what? Jesus agrees. It's not. And Jesus is telling us it's important. We have to do this anyway. Today's passage is the part 2 of the question that Jesus asked us last week. Who do you say that I am? Now, if you remember that passage, Peter shot his hand up right away because, he always has the quick answer. You are the Messiah. Matthew likes to portray Peter as the eager student, quick to answer, but sometimes a little slow to fully understand. It's as if he's passed the fill-in-the-blank quiz, but he's really not ready for the essay test, is he? And think about it, that great reading from Romans, that's Paul trying to give us one possible answer to the essay exam. But we've been thinking about this for a long time, haven't we? Well, just as soon as Jesus starts painting a fuller picture of what kind of Messiah he has come to be, Peter stops him because he's freaking out. Why? Because Peter's idea of Messiah was a leader that was for them, for the Israelites. He wanted a leader, a shepherd king, a warrior, who could help them to finally be the winners so that they could come out on top for once instead of always being under the thumb of Roman occupation. Now, I think Jesus would actually give Peter partial credit for that last bit. I mean, he's definitely planning on challenging the powers of empire that stifle abundant life for so many people. part of what gets him in trouble, right? But Jesus is not just thinking of freeing Peter's people, and he definitely is not raising an army to do it, at least not an army that seeks to overturn with weapons and violence. Oh no, Jesus has a very different plan. It's a plan that meets hate with love and confronts selfishness with self-giving. And Jesus knows, he knows already that this is going to get him into trouble, so much trouble that it'll sometimes look as if death and defeat has won instead of the kind of victory that human beings are looking for. So, are we surprised when Peter's reply is, "No way! This must never happen to you, Jesus"? I mean, I have to admit, I am sympathetic with Peter, because it does not sound like a sound strategy, and the collateral damage feels like it's way too high. But I don't think that Jesus is drawing up a battle plan for a suicide mission. That is not his intent for himself or for us. Rather, I think that Jesus is questioning the entire logic that assumes that there have to be winners and losers. Instead, I think Jesus is suggesting that we might have to give up something we really like for a good that is for us, but not just for us. And I think Jesus is suggesting that humanity basically gets stuck self-sabotaging if they can't figure out how to walk this path together. He says, "For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." I mean, Christians have been mining the depths of that statement for 2 millennia. And like Peter, I think we have often missed and still often miss the point, or maybe only get partial credit for it. I mean, listen again. "For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." There's this crazy sort of circularity there. It leaves us asking an important question. What kind of big things do we lose when we are trying to save something that we aren't willing to give up? Now, there's a lot of answers to that question. I think we could spend all day talking that through. So I'm going to stick to 3 that come from the themes that we're talking about today. Because I have to say, too often, we're willing to trade off worker safety, pay equity, and living wages because we're unwilling to let go of the lure of maximized profits, winning at the compensation game, or paying less for services. And I discovered on the internet that the planet actually produces enough food right now to feed 1.5 times our global population. Yet food insecurity and malnutrition persists. Why? Well, because we remain invested in a global food system that feeds some and not others, while sacrificing the environment in the process. And in fact, we may very well be losing our livable planet for all sorts of reasons that just kind of come down to our failure to be able to set aside individual, corporate, or national interests in order to work together and come up with creative solutions that can combat climate change through shared sacrifice. Okay, so where is the good news in here? for today? You might be asking right about now. Well, I think that the central mystery of all of this is that idea of what kind of Messiah Jesus is, and what that means for us as his followers, how we follow Jesus. And Jesus is there for all of us who are, not always the quickest or sharpest of learners, because he says it 3 times in 3 different ways. And all of the ways that he says it asserts this interconnection between all of us, such that we thrive when we set aside narrow self-interest. And you know what? We flounder when we don't. Human life, indeed all life, relies on turning not inward, but outwards. Our willingness to give up on some of what we could have or seize, and instead turn towards love and nurture of the whole, is part of what powers that truly thriving cycle that includes life abundant and death and resurrection. And Jesus is the one that showed us the way, that blazed this path for us. St. Augustine liked this distinction and used it as one of his definitions of sin. He called it curvatus in se. Now, I'm not a Latin scholar, so if somebody wants to correct me later, that would be great. But I'm told that basically means curved inward on oneself. To sin is to curve inward on one's self. You see, when we curve in, we disconnect. We stop cooperating as part of this miraculous great organism that is all life in its fullest. Jesus' point is that to do this so hurts everything, including ourselves. It's as if we become withered blossoms. And Jesus is telling us that redemption comes from unfurling, from blooming and opening up our hearts and minds to a path that centers love, mercy, and sometimes even sacrificing something for the needs of our neighbors and of our planet. That's kind of all Jesus is asking of Peter and us, really, I think, today. And he agrees with us, it is not an easy path. But it is the path that leads us through death into life in its fullest. We've been talking all summer about our stories of faith and our encounters with God and Jesus. But you know what? Encounters with divine, they change us. They're the kind of thing that open us up, open our hearts to new pathways. It could be a path that we may not have noticed, even when it might have been right there in front of us all along. But it could also be a path that we've always known about, just, kind of closed ourselves off from it because we didn't like what we would have to give up in order to take this path. Look at that last picture from our series of art. This is, we've had these wonderful art pieces all summer long, and this is the last one in the series. And if you have your harvest prayer, it's on the front of your bulletin, but if you have your harvest prayer, it's on the back of that. It's in color. It's got some nice color, this one. Anyway, if you look at that picture, it's not what you would expect for an illustration of that story from Exodus, was it? I mean, where's the bush? There's no bush. And, there's kind of flames, but not in the traditional way, because how do we usually see this? There's the bush, There's the flames. There's this kind of little narrow circle of light, and maybe Moses is only just barely stepping in with his bare feet because he's a little afraid to get close. Yet God is clearly represented here. Where do you guys see God?
The eyes.
The eyes. That's right. It's straightforward. That's God right there. And it's the center point of all of the action in this painting. Now there's all this stuff, the green stuff, that looks like it's being drawn in from all those different directions. That stuff, it could be leaves, it could be tears. I mean, it could even be microscopic organisms, right? I mean, it's pretty open to our imaginations what all that stuff is. And then look at the things that are the flames, because they're kind of pushing them back out again. It's as if this energy of God is pulling them in and then sending them forth. The only piece of life in this that is not on board with that sense of movement in and out is Moses. His feet are orthogonal to that, aren't they? It's like Moses is not sure yet. Not sure if he will say yes to the call that God has given him to take part. And can you blame him? He'd have to give up the safety and prosperity of hiding out as a shepherd, tending sheep for his father-in-law, to go and lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Something that you have to admit could be quite dangerous for him. Pharaoh's not just going to say yes, is he? But God pulls us in to call us outward again. Jesus lets us know who he is so that we can open up to who we have been created to be. To be loving, to be interconnected, to be nurturing of all that lives, all of humanity and all of this great planet and all of the universe that has been created that we're a part of. Now, Jesus says, yeah, you might have to give up something that you really like, but you're giving that up for a good that is for you, but not just for you. It's for all of this. And ultimately, I think we know in our hearts, we know that we are all in this together with God. So really, all we need to do is to act like it. Amen.